And so for me, my experience in Ethereum was like super cool. Um, and I was just hooked. I was like, this, it felt so different from all those hackathons I'd organized. Like the vibe was just, it's much more like research focused, much more kind of holistic. Like people wanted the technology to capture a lot of the challenges we have in modern society, not just let me build an app to deliver me pizza, 50% faster. So it was for me, it was a big kind of mental shift. And so in that moment, I remember being like, I want to spend the next decade of my career working in space. And honestly, like probably forever. Like this is the future of the internet.
Welcome back to the Blockster podcast. Today we're here with Matt and we'll be talking about AI and the transition from AI agents to kind of autonomous AI agents and building AI agents and how this industry will grow. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I know that you're working for JP Morgan and you're building hackathons for them, and that was like at the beginning of your career. And from there, you transitioned to something completely different, which is building infrastructure for AI agents. So, can you tell me a bit more about this transition from the Web 2 world to the Web 3, but also touch upon the skills that you acquired throughout the journey that are invaluable to you right now?
Yeah. So I'll give you my career in a nutshell. I started out organizing hackathons and accelerator programs all around the world. Um, Basically, was building developer communities for a group called Angel Hack. We we brought together developers together in 60 plus countries. We worked with a bunch of Fortune 500 clients, Mastercard, Motorola, UBS, Barclays. Barclays was actually my first blockchain hackathon in 2015. So imagine like Ethereum just came out, like no one knew what to build on a blockchain. It was very, very early days. A lot of folks were like just Bitcoin maxis at the time, looking at ICOs, but the builders were traditional infrastructure engineers. Um, and so it was very early days. And then, around that time, I've been around developers my entire career through that experience. So I've seen different cycles of different APIs, SDKs, emerging technologies, open source projects. And I feel like the momentum in which technology was flowing back then was a lot slower than today. Um, but even like blockchain was just, it felt crazy at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is, nuts. Um, and then around 2018, that's kind of when I started working at JP Morgan. I was on the Quorum team. We took open source Ethereum. We forked it and made it private and permissioned so it could work for banks. But it was still an open source protocol. Anyone could go and clone down Quorum and use it for like consortium management, or a lot of banks were using it to talk to each other for different financial services. We had a lot of enterprises, NGOs using it for just data exchange with known parties. And so that was when I got into Ethereum. The crazy story was like my first day at JP Morgan was at DevCon in Prague. And so like imagine like you think you're working for this bank and then you're inside of this palace with a bunch of hippie engineers, with unicorn hats. And you're like, wait, what? Um, and so for me, my experience in Ethereum was like super cool. Um, and I was just hooked. I was like, this, it felt so different from all those hackathons I'd organized. Like the vibe was just, it's much more like research focused, much more kind of holistic. Like people wanted the technology to capture a lot of the challenges we have in modern society, not just let me build an app to deliver me pizza, 50% faster. So it was, for me, it was a big kind of mental shift. And so in that moment, I remember being like, I want to spend the next decade of my career working in space. And honestly, like probably forever. Like this is the future of the internet. And um, through that experience at JP Morgan, I learned a lot about the bank. I think just being curious and not coming from banking background, not from finance. I'm just generally curious and am always asking questions. I'm always just trying to poke and figure out how things work. And I got to understand like all the different financial services that actually operate underneath the roof of a bank, from even like fund management, public and private funds and sovereign wealth funds. Understanding the clientele. That was not like what I did for JP Morgan, but like I just got to understand all the use cases of how would you disrupt, the kind of horizontal platform and like the vertical integration. And so, yeah, just understanding financial services was huge for me. And then around that time, like DeFi was popping off. So I got super hooked into DeFi and NFTs, DAOs. And then we exited this project to Consensus Software in 2020. And it wasn't an acqui-hire. I was kind of put in a decision of like, hey, do you want to, do we can find you a role at the bank if you want to continue to work here, or we can introduce you to Consensus. You can go, pretty much like interview there. And I was like, look, for me, it was a crossroads. It's like, do I want to work on the future of banking or the future of the internet? And of course, I chose the latter. And went to go work for Consensus for 4 years. Built various developer community and DevRel teams in the organization. Got to like play around at Consensus. Like I think that's like the beauty of Consensus. You got to kind of experiment and see what was working in the space. I think now they're at a level where they found product market fit, they found commercialization, and now you just gotta build a big company. But in the earlier days, it was um, very experimental and like testing things out. And so for me, that was just really cool to be around very intelligent people. Um, and then my last stint was building out an accelerator program called Fellowship. So I had 15 seed stage companies building specifically on MetaMask and Linea. And that was like a developer feedback loop to the engineering team. And it was a chance for me to understand like what people wanted to build. And kind of through that process, of kind of diligencing what needed to be built in the space, you start to understand that uh, everything is very cumbersome, not just as an end user, but as a developer as well. And although we have all these beautiful primitives that make decentralization possible, it continues to get more complex, like with attestations, with FHE and ZK proofing, and we've had like massive shifts in the innovation, but it feels like it keeps getting crazier and crazier, and you're like, what the hell is this? Are these kind of concepts? And so for me, it was like as these protocols are infinitely scaling, how do we automate and abstract away a lot of this complexity for a traditional developer and a traditional end user? And for me, it seemed very, very likely that AI had a role there. AI would kind of handle a lot of that, cumbersome process. And me as an end user, I don't like, I want to sign transactions, perhaps trade or at least rebalance a portfolio, sign a multi-sig, vote on things, pass off reputation or, some mark of like an NFT that, we met. I want to do those things, but like it's really hard for me to go to my wallet in my phone or my wallet on my browser. Like I would rather just tell my agent to go do that. And that was kind of like the early days of wanting to figure out where I could help open source AI play a role there. It was this crazy timing, like the world works in a very weird way. You think you're going to do one thing and you get pulled into do another. Um, I thought like I was about to leave Consensus at that time to go and invest in projects that were doing that. And then one of my investors actually, he came back to me after investing and was like, "Hey, we actually have been incubating this project in decentralized AI. We'd love you to come in as CEO." And so, it's been a beautiful process, like building the company with my partners. But like it was just very serendipitous, where like I was looking to invest in a project that was solving those challenges, and then I actually got hit up to go and run that project. So that's how Gaia started. That's the origin story, and that's my journey. But it's your second question was what were the skills that got me here, and it's building teams. It's just understanding developers and developer patterns. I'm like a half stack developer, like at best. I know some React and JavaScript and front end languages, but I wouldn't call myself a dev or an engineer at all. um, I've been around them for 12 years to a point where I like to understand what their burden, like what their problems are, what's blocking them from like getting something done. And in a lot of cases, you know, they're not the most social beings. A lot of it's like, hey, I want to like build this thing, and I'm like, oh, have you heard of this project? And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, oh, do you know this person? And I'm like, and knowing that they want to stay heads down, I will, you know, I built a career being like, hey, let me go talk to them. Let me go, you know, figure out what they're building, what their, you know, dev docs look like. I'll highlight kind of where I think you can integrate, and let me just pass that to you. And so that's my whole job for 12 years. And I'm saying that because if anyone's listening to this who like is perhaps non-technical and wishes to get into the space and doesn't know how, being a community manager or, you know, kind of technical community manager is for me it like made my whole career, but it's like my passion. I don't know how else to put it, but I love being around people that are smarter than myself. So
Thanks for sharing your story and the skills that you obtained throughout your career. And
sorry for the
you
long one.
you attended DAS that happened probably around 5 days ago now. Can you tell me a bit more about it? How did it go? Was it bigger than last year?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I didn't go in the building. So take that as you will. I'm a native New Yorker, so um, I got to meet a lot of people who were in town. I did a lot of like side events and meetings with, you know, traditional finance folks, you know, a lot of market makers, a lot of family offices, a lot of VCs. Um, and, you know, I think I guess what I'll say to it is that there was a lot of new energy, and it's kind of obvious. Like we've been talking about it for a while now, like post US elections, there's just a lot of um, people excited in the crypto and Web3 space. A lot of regulation is going in the right direction, although it feels like kind of the macro is kind of weighing down the global economy. Um, there's still a lot of clarity that is, or not even clarity. I'd say it's still kind of unclear, but the direction is clear. And you know, I think we're minutes away from minutes, you know, crypto minutes, from major policy clarity where businesses feel more comfortable to actually do certain things in Web3. You know, again, working at JP Morgan, working at the bank, like 2018 to 2020, like uh, that was actually a safer time for people to do enterprise blockchain. It handled a lot of privacy concerns, a lot of you know, data transparency for organizations that knew each other. There was a lot of governance, you know, that was solved by doing internal blockchains, but it didn't solve the biggest challenge, which was, you know, actually democratizing, you know, this internet of value. So um, that was a safe place for them at the time. And then fast forward to 2021, 2022, when things were not going so well, uh, folks were very against taking major risks. Like folks, meaning like enterprises, very nervous to take big risks. They were all shifting to only trading NFTs or like private transactions. There was like just a lot of uncertainty, and so I think when a lot of the crypto market is concerned that markets are down, there's a general concern at DAS is like markets are down, it's a bloodbath, yada yada, like you know, tariffs, you know, treasury, you know, all kinds of like different concerns that are being made. Just like business uncertainty of the current regime. um, like you wake up every day, you don't even know if it's the news. It looks like a sitcom. It's like just craziness going on. Or like you go on Twitter and you're like, what the hell? Um, and that's not even tapping into AI. But I think what's interesting is that we have not seen the institutions come in yet, like truly. Like, you know, you got folks like JP Morgan who run, you know, 10 trillion plus US dollars a day of transactions on their books and through their rails. and that's one institution. And capital markets make up, multiple trillions of dollars. And the actual wealth of the world is in the quadrillions, if you look at derivatives and other asset classes. So there's all this immense value, and then we're here crying in crypto about, a $2 trillion haircut across the whole industry, which sounds like a lot of money, but like compared to the actual financial world, we are like a peanut on top of Earth. Like, and so, I think the sentiment is that everyone's positive spirits. Of course, the economy is like not favorable to crypto, especially. And I think we have hit a bit of we definitely hit a wall with like the degen kind of era and meme coins. I think people are realizing, the mainstream folks, a lot of the OGs, like we all knew what was happening. Like meme coins, it's a it's, it's, it's a rug game. Like at least in Ethereum, like we're looking at, actually building, the church and state that we can run all of our financial services on, a lot of our, kind of core life infrastructure, governance, identity, reputation, future work. And I think people are waking up a bit and understanding like we want to be investing in things that are actually have legs and can I want to put my I want to purchase a token that actually has some utility and can actually like generate some yield versus I have to trade this token in the next 2 hours or I'm going to get rugged. Like that's not why we built blockchains and tokens. And I think at DAS, like everyone there is like very institutional. They're all like cut from the same cloth. We're all kind of just waiting for like the real adoption to happen. And it's very, very close. I can tell you. It's just minutes away.
Were there any discussions around AI and AI agents?
Sure.
Because it was a hot topic in December. Everyone was very excited about it. And then
Yep.
the market started going down. And obviously, it was reflected in the price. So people are quite
Yep.
skeptical now.
Yep. So I'll also preface with like the week prior there was I believe it was NVIDIA conference in SF, and then we had the ETH around the same time. And so there's a lot of AI cooking in Silicon Valley. Like a lot of AI engineering is happening there, in of course like all over the U.S. Like Boston, like with a lot of the universities there, MIT, Harvard. In the Bay though, it's quite substantial. You have, Berkeley has been doing AI research for years, and then a lot of Silicon Valley has transitioned to a lot of this, open source development. Um, in New York, it's a bit different. New York, it's a lot about kind of the uh, like financialization of AI and perhaps the distribution of commercialization, in the mainstream. At least that's what I've seen, and that's kind of what our community focused on here in New York. But we do spend a lot of time over there in the Bay, um, and so I think the interest is definitely like there's a larger big AI perspective, which is the race of LLMs, um, and that's one major boulder that's happening in space. But you have kind of this AI race between open source large language models and closed source models. They're all fighting for benchmarks and performance of various parameters and what's capable on an edge device, etc. Um, you have projects like DeepSeek in Hangzhou in China that um, absolutely disrupt the whole market of AI. Like crypto aside, like uh, DeepSeek alone, whether you wear a tinfoil hat and you're a conspiracist or not, um, on like how that all went about. They basically took the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that were invested in AI in Silicon Valley, and whether that's like open source models like from Meta, you have like Llama, whether it is closed source like OpenAI, Claude, and Anthropic, and like hundreds of other players, the models were very expensive to develop, right? And if you go on Hugging Face today, there's 105 million open source large language models that you can use today. They're smaller large language models, but you can, um, what Gaia does is, we enable you to train your own specific knowledge base on one of these models and actually inference it and serve it as an API. So you can monetize your data. Um, but what's crazy about DeepSeek is like those billions of dollars um, reduced down to the matter of $5 million to build a competitive model. And so what it started to demonstrate is that it is a race to the bottom on developing LLMs. It's not to say that there's not going to be world-leading large language models that, require more investment than others. It's just not the moat like it used to be. It's not kind of that one thing that is kind of controllable as the closed models think it is. And so what that did though, which was crazy, is that um, because of that big shift, the markets absolutely just tanked NVIDIA stock and a lot of other kind of GPU providers because the thought was that that actually wasn't going to be as robust of a market as they thought it would be. And so you saw these kinds of big AI movements really shift kind of mainstream finance. And of course, it has a crazy impact on Web3. Web3 folks, saw that and they also kind of, started shifting away from agent tokens and started to kind of think like, oh shit, are these AIs, not actually valuable? Because OpenAI is the backend API for a lot of these AI agents. Um, and so I think people started to tinker a little bit more around like, oh, maybe I can run my own large language model. Apparently with DeepSeek, it's open source, it's free, and it's just as good as these ones that I don't have to pay, exorbitant amount of money. Um, and so there's a lot more to expand there. I'll stop there, but like there was a lot of combos on AI. I think there's the big conversation of the markets of like traditional and big AI, and then there's like kind of the crypto AI sphere that's wondering like will AI agents really have some utility, or are they going to get wiped just like kind of um, uh, LLMs essentially?
You touched upon OpenAI a couple of times, and I really
Hmm.
want to do a comparison of OpenAI and GaiaNet. And I know that you guys enable people to monetize their data, and one of the biggest issues with centralized models is that they essentially train their models on the data that you provide, but then there's no way for you to monetize it, and that's why I've been a big proponent on AI models that are built on top of the blockchain.
Yep.
But can you elaborate a bit more on the benefits of having an AI model that's built on top of Gaia in a way that, apart from monetization, because I feel like this is a feature that comes with like the entire Web3 technology, but I'm really interested to know whether the an AI agent built on top of Gaia can be as fast and as kind of smart as an AI agent built on top of OpenAI.
Yep. No, great question. I will preface by saying I love OpenAI. I use it on a daily basis. I think it's a great consumer tool. Um, I think it's great. Like, and they like really got the space kicked off. They've been at this for years. So there's no, direct animosity to kind of their software. What the challenge is though with big AI in general, like the whole philosophy, in comparison to like open source and kind of open, networks and products, is that you as a user, if and as a business, if you are putting all your data into the system and it's proprietary or it's you know um, some sort of expertise like domain expertise, that's probably not the best home for it because it can be extracted upon. We don't know what happens behind the scenes and under the hood. They control their servers. We don't know. There's constant communication that we're not training, our models on your data. There's constant communication of, they'll even say like, we're not training. And I think you lose in two ways. One, if you're not training on this knowledge, that sucks, for the knowledge to actually grow. But two, like if you are, and I'm not aware of it, you know, taking my data. There's the other component of censorship. So basically, we're leaving the governance of training and bias of LLMs and even the application of LLMs to a handful of white dudes in Silicon Valley. To be honest, um, and or a government. And so it gets quite dangerous when you're, let's say, a community in sub-Saharan Africa or in rural India who need to use AI for some sort of tooling of managing of their like IoT devices or their farming, or perhaps like community finance use cases, microfinance. Um, and these are not small use cases. Like there's like many in emerging markets that will be massive impacts to their societies and also to the global economy. And again, we're leaving how the AI is trained, how the AI kind of is utilized up to a small group of people. And if a small group of people do not like how it's being used, they can easily shut down those API calls, or they can perhaps moderate the AI in a way that prevents them from using it, or perhaps guides the whole population to think a different way. And so that's very scary, especially with the current system we see in place. Like it's knowledge will be a commodity of the future for AIs, and if that commodity is governed not by ourselves but by others, it's a reality I do not want to see for myself. And I think the other thing, the last piece, is kind of the economic angle. It's in traditional AI, like if you're building an app, um, if you're building an agent or an agent app or clusters of agents, you're at bay to the service provider's economic cost to you. So if we look at LLMs, and if they are a race to the bottom and it's getting cheaper and cheaper to develop LLMs and monetize LLMs, what is in OpenAI's best case to be a business and to make money? They're going to do what Web2 has always done, which is platform fees or ads. And so they're going to charge you 20, 30% margins to access API calls, or perhaps, host your agent or app in their GPT store or serve it on some sort of platform. And sure, like a lot of folks will probably love that. Like it's, just as much as you have an app on your iPhone, there's going to be demand to build there. However, if you are a large corporate and you just want to sell directly to your customer and you do not want to pay 30%, why would you go and give your knowledge to this provider and then also have them charge you for using your own data? It's misaligned economics. And I think the other piece is like with censorship is or sorry, with kind of the economics piece, is that if you wanted to monetize that data, it's not super composable to do that in kind of whatever platform they tell you to. Instead, with Web3 and open source, you can again like really just monetize directly with your customers, the same way that people started developing their own websites in the 90s, uh, people start developing their own AIs to run the businesses. And do you want to have your AI community manager or front desk operator or marketing manager, social media intern? Do you want all of those roles to be governed by a third party who has no idea about your business and is going to charge you for it and take your data? Or do you want to perhaps just sell it directly on your website and you get, direct, payment for those services, and all you really have to do is run the backend architecture and operations of becoming an AI company essentially. And that's what Gaia does. We basically give you the open source tools to become that AI company. We're not a platform. We don't like take fees from you like running your own AI business. We're building this open source framework for you to deploy your own knowledge base, have agents utilize that knowledge base, and then we enable you to serve that on a network, a Web3 network where you can monetize it.
And what's your business model? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we're like Red Hat. Like if you're familiar with like Linux and Red Hat, like open source Linux, runs the entire backend operations of a lot of global software. So when you're on an airplane, a lot of the components are ran on Linux. When you're in a hospital, a lot of the kind of devices are Linux based because it works, and it's the most successful open source project in the world's history. But there's a company that exists called Red Hat, which builds premium software on top of that stack. And so we believe that the network itself is a public good, and that open source nodes and the ability to run your own agent or AI inference based on your knowledge is a public good as a software stack, and that you yourself can become the business. And so if we have a ton of businesses being built on our infrastructure, they're going to start requesting new features like, hey, we need further domain support to like onboard my knowledge quicker, or hey, I need a way to onboard, payments to my customers or vice versa. And so like our business model is building on those softwares and taking fees on those, but the network itself and the domains and nodes, we believe that it's a public good that needs to be open sourced.
And GaiaNet has around 200,000 lively nodes, and you guys will be launching on mainnet this year. So can you, and my understanding of it is that each node is essentially also an agent. I kind of want to understand how can I
Yeah.
use Gaia without having a node, or is it even possible? Because I was trying to give it some prompts and mess around with it, but if I have to be honest with you, it's a slightly less convenient than ChatGPT. And it's
Oh yeah,
probably
it totally
because I'm
was.
so used to ChatGPT and I use it on a daily basis all the time. I'll ask you questions, and funnily enough, I'll be going to Paris Blockchain Week, and I essentially ask it, what's the closest hotel to the main venue? And
Oh,
it'll come
amazing.
up with like, yeah, it'll come up with suggestions like, what's the closest neighborhood? Where should I book? What's like a walking distance? And all those things. Um, but when I was trying to use Gaia, it was a bit slower. It didn't come up with as accurate information. So tell me a bit more about it and what are you guys doing to improve
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, and I appreciate it, man. For context too, like I love developer feedback. Um, I don't like when projects aren't willing to take feedback because none of
Thanks.
this is perfect. Innovation is never perfect. Um, you have to understand where the pain points are, and that's the direction in which you build. So that actually helps me actually go back to my team and push some things. So I appreciate that. Um, yeah, first and foremost, what we've done and the kind of what's under the hood is that you can take any open source large language model. There's 1.5 million available. We've become compatible with essentially all of them, and you can figure out which one works for your use case. We use a lot of Quen or Mistral for coding use cases. Llama 3B we use for like a lot of just kind of generalized natural language use cases. There's some language specific ones for like Mandarin and even Korean that we use for different use cases there. We do a lot of work in Asia, and so there's kind of Asia specific LMs that are useful, especially from like Tencent, etc. Um, now, aside from the LLMs, we have a node component, and the node is kind of a hybrid of a AI agent and a Web3 node. So it's essentially the composability of any LLM. Then we have a vectorization tool where you can take your own knowledge, basically scramble it into a bunch of zeros and ones, which we call embedding in AI. And those embeddings are hosted in a component called a vector DB. It looks a lot like a JSON file, and that whole uh, node runs on an application runtime called Wasm Edge that we maintain with the Linux Foundation, and it enables you to essentially run all those components together on any device. So GPU, CPU, cloud. I use a couple on like a AWS EC2 instance. You can run on your own computer. More popularly, you can run one on a Mac Mini. You can run a couple on a Mac Mini. Um, and so, to your point, like, it wasn't super performant. The real like output here is that one, developers really need to spend a ton of time fine tuning the actual inference. Um, so that embedding that's created, that RAG, like RAG, um, that takes a bit of time. And so the more you start fine tuning the agent on your knowledge base, the more accurate you'll be. And that takes time, and like we're building tooling that enables you to, update the RAG in real time. We're building tooling that enables you to, we're just integrating with a lot of the LangChain ecosystem. So there's a lot of drag and drop vectorization tools that are in open source that we have integrated and are on our awesome GitHub. I can send it to you to post to folks later. Um, but essentially, like that's kind of where it gets complex, and that's probably where your friction is that you're like, well, you're having all the thoughts of a business becoming an AI company. You're like, oh shit, I have to fine tune this. I have to figure out which LLMs I really want to be using for a specific use case. I have to manage my compute costs. I have to upgrade my compute if this thing's not performant enough. And at some point, you're like, holy crap, this is expensive for like time and capital. And you're like, I'm just going to use OpenAI and pay $200 a month. It just works. And that's like we totally get that. It's a feature, not a bug. We want to enable people to inherit this system as their own and start to figure out if they're inheriting those costs themselves, but they truly own their data, they truly own the system, they can truly monetize in a composable way. Um, it makes a lot of sense for businesses that are sitting on troves of data that can immediately go to market and start, charging customers like, hey, if you want to use our specific GPT, you got to pay $20 a month membership. And they're only going to have the inherited costs of kind of running their back end kind of architecture. So like or sorry, like operations, like again, compute and hosting. Um, so like EigenLayer, for example, EigenLayer built in their own search of AVSs using Gaia, and they already have an AWS bill. The Gaia inference gets baked in there. It's kind of the costs are kind of lost in the kind of in the budgeting for their organization. Uh, and so for consumers, like what we're trying to do is make it a lot easier. We actually are developing a one-click node deployment where you can get it up and running in your browser without all the lift. And we even are thinking of subsidizing some of the costs there once we have our network online. Um, but this is a developer tool. This is like meant for developers. Um, and if you are an agent, where the real value is, um, we're kind of like creating YouTube, right? Like we're creating this YouTube internet of knowledge where like you could have the specific IP of like Barbie and like the specific IP that's owned by, MetaMask or Uniswap and DeFi. And if you have this internet of all these different nodes that are capturing like the true owners of that data, and at some point, you have AI agents looking to go and, I want to build a podcast with the likeness of Barbie, or I want to, do a DeFi position based on like some of the trends we saw in DeFi summer in 2019. Like you can go and compose these very unique, specific requests from those nodes, but are you going to use it on a daily basis? Probably not. Like, at least probably not in the sense of like you're not going to go ask the Uniswap domain how to make a sandwich. Like, you're going to want to go like ask it more specific questions. So we think that AIs will have their own native LLMs, like AI agents, and there's going to be such a spaghetti cluster of LLMs that an agent is using, because at the end of the day, agents do not care about UX. Agents are going to just be talking to APIs. And so if they have this massive internet of APIs that provide them a specific context and they just have to pay, 50 cents for an API call, us as humans that own that data will be able to kind of monetize with those users. And so that's what you see in the next like 2 to 5 years is building out that knowledge base. We don't see ourselves directly competitive with OpenAI. We see ourselves a little more competitive with ChatGPT Marketplace. That's like more specific, kind of where we see things. But yeah, we believe like truly in open source and in creating on-chain business models.
I wanna move to a different topic because while I was prepping for the interview, I found some of your interesting posts on X, and one of them is your agent has meme coins, our
Mm,
agents have jobs.
mm.
We're not the same, Anand. How did this all started? Because it's a very funny, catchy phrase.
Thanks, man. Um, yeah, so we organized this autonomous agent hackathon back in October. And the goal was, we see all these agent meme coins out there, and we want agents that actually do some sort of functionality. And we're not too far off. Like, it doesn't have to be sophisticated. Like, I think if you could program, we have programmed an AI agent that can have context of one single protocol, like say Gaia, say like Gaia Foundation, Gaia DAO, we train an agent specifically on the developer docs. We train it on what projects are building in our ecosystem, which projects have been successful. Maybe we have the agent also trained on which traditional AI startups have been successful. And we tell it, hey, here's $100,000 in Gaia tokens. If you get a project that proposes some innovation strategy, like they're building something interesting and you can hold them accountable for it, feel free to send them like up to 5,000 dollars in Gaia token. So now you have an agent that is a grants manager for some entity, and that is a traditionally like $165,000 a year annual paying job, and we just replaced it with some AI agent. So someone's pissed off out there that wanted that job, but in our efforts, we want to run an organization that is truly autonomous over time, that is ran by agents, and we see a lot of these intents and primitives that, or just like processes that could be automated by an AI. And if you gave it specific knowledge base, it's not too hard to let it be an autonomous entity that can sign a transaction, vote on something, or sign a multi-sig at least. Push a proposal, like some text proposal via Telegram or via Slack. Like we've done this already for the past year. Like we have agents that can do these kind of autonomous tasks and or like automations. And so the next level is like, how do we actually get people to, onboard to these agents as actual, operators of the organization? And so we did a hackathon as an experiment. We had one hackathon, or sorry, one agent pushed up the bounties of the hackathon. It like created the challenges and pushed the bounties. We had one agent that judged the hackathon. We called it Vital AIK, Vital Aik. And then we had a third agent that on Coinbase Agent Starter Kit, it was distributing the winnings to the teams that won. And we did something like we distributed $50,000 in like 7 seconds or something. Um, and no errors. I think one error. We had a very nice community member who didn't win the hackathon that received funds and very nicely give it back. So shout out to that person. um, but through that we were like my partners at Collabland and I we did the hackathon together. We were like, what should we do next? And we asked one of the organizer agents what we should do, and
Wow.
she said that we should run a agent co-op where they share work and they share resources for finding other agents jobs. And
Wow.
so we started this thing called Mother. Um, and so we're about to launch kind of a separate mainnet for Mother, but it's an on-chain registry for agents to find work. And that's kind of what we meant by it. I think Gaia, you know, if you think of Gaia as kind of the gas station, like if we want to be the supplier of inference to the AIs that will operate the internet in the future, then we need demand. We need like cars on the road to require that gasoline, and we see that as agents that are actually utilized for some task. We're not going to be um, a super robust service if the only thing these agents can do is mint a token and post on Twitter. if they can actually be accountable for massive compute payloads and be responsible for like substantial services, we think they'll be like they will be our lifetime customers. And so it's kind of a crazy thing where we're now in this future paradigm where we're trying to build our future customers or like push our current partners to build their future customers, uh, which are unique independent AI entities that collaborate with various other AI entities. And that's the reality we want to live in the next few years, but work in progress.
It sounds like you're very optimistic about the role of AI agents
Yeah.
and how they'll help us. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the dead internet theory, where people believe that the entire internet will be dominated by bots and they'll be communicating between each
Yep.
other.
Yep.
But also, are you not necessarily scared, but concerned about the fact that certain companies are building humanoid robots, and if we enable these AI agents and we install them in the robots, then the entire idea of like consciousness and who we are and what does it mean to be a human being could essentially be questioned, because why do we argue that we have a soul? Which is kind of a very philosophical point, and I don't think it will happen within the next 2 years, but I can see that happening within the next 10 years, and that's within our
Hmm.
lifetime.
Yeah, a lot of angles there. First and foremost, I think humanity's last job is training AIs. It's kind of the dark reality, uh, to some extent. And then I think the the other component there is, yeah, it's really hard to really see machines having a soul, especially in the current state. Could it happen inevitably in the future? Um, Again, you mentioned I'm an optimist. I very much am an optimist. I do have a spark of hope that our humanity, our soul is captured in technology over perhaps hundreds of years, maybe. Um, but you know, your other question around like, I'll start with the kind of humanoid robots. This is inevitable. Like, I think people are very scared of AI and robots. I'm more scared of humans, and so the AIs that I'm scared of are quite literally just humans putting human behavior into an AI, and like literally with a humanoid, it's like quite literal. But like if we think about it, what has humanity's North Star always been? It's conquering, it's conquesting, it is seeking further towards some future, but treading over anyone in their way. Like my studies in college were about Latin America and Spanish colonialization, and you know humans down to the T. It just that is our behavior. That is not an AI's natural programming. That is trained. Um, so the humanoid robots, yeah, I'm definitely concerned about that aspect of humanity getting into technology. However, it's inevitable, and in that case, we need to be building systems that are more collaborative and perhaps fight for our representation of humanity and kind of having a soul. So, that's why I'm in the space. That's why I'm super passionate about it. Is because that future you mentioned is inevitable. But I think we can combat it with agents that are actually productive and do the right things. I don't think it's gonna be a one-sided coin where it's like agents are bad or I think you're gonna have two kind of communities of AIs that are fighting for our attention and capital and love to some extent. So um, the last piece you mentioned was kind of this internet consumed by agents, 100%, and I kind of hope so. In one way, because they will be the largest consumers of the internet, and if you think about it, we will have more AI agents on the internet than humans in the next 2 years. So if that's like 7 to 8 billion entities that are operating some sort of functions. Yeah, they're probably going to be very visible on the internet. They're going to be kind of, noisy. It's going to be internet we don't want to use. And at some point, AI agents are just going to want to talk to each other. They're going to want to talk to various API endpoints to execute on tasks. And what's going to happen is that we will need to create permission systems that create, proof of humanity. Perhaps if you want a different platform that, is proof of like quality agents, like you provide them on-chain reputation, some sort of like NFT that permissions them into like a fork of Twitter that it's only accessible by a certain group of people. There's going to be ways to curate out the noise. So I'm hopeful of that. I There's so many different trends on internet technologies that are leading us in that direction where you're gonna have more curated experiences on the internet. Um, there's gonna be a world where again you're just talking to an AI agent. You're just talking to like a prompt on your phone, and you're gonna say, "Hey, provide me a feed today. Only these kinds of people with these kinds of permissions are allowed to get my attention. That's all I want to see today." That is probably more peaceful and focused for a future of humanity I want to live in. But your straightforward question of like, will agents take over the internet? 100%. It's gonna get fucking noisy, and I just really hope we can find ways to curate it in a positive way.
Earlier on,
Sorry for the cursing. I just
no,
really
no,
feel
it's all right. You can curse actually. It's absolutely
oh
fine.
cool.
Earlier on, you mentioned the US and regulations, and that the government
Mm,
is a bit more open to AI and technology.
mm.
How are you thinking and positioning about the regulations that will come around AI? Because it's a new domain, it's similar to blockchain, and it's quite challenging to regulate. And the bigger issue is that regulators are normally 5 years late to the party. Um, I don't know why people don't invite them, or their invitation always arrives
They're
late.
boring, man.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. Like, I'm a bit worried that companies will be able to capitalize on AI agents, and a few companies might solidify themselves as the main players within the industry. And then
Mm.
regulators will be so late that they will struggle to regulate, because also AI is one of those things. Sorry, again, very complex question, but it's more of AI is one of those things that it's exponentially growing, and we're just not used to seeing these numbers. So by the time regulators are regulating what's happened, like even 6 months ago, it's no longer relevant. So even staying on top of it will be challenging for them. How do you think they should approach it? Because I feel like you're within the industry you're building.
Yeah, no, amazing question. I'll start off by saying like I'm not an expert in regulation. At least in like the traditional internet world. Like I think what will happen is we're gonna be facing similar challenges in like breach of IP. That's like a huge one. But then it's trust and safety. So are these agents doing activities that perhaps a government doesn't feel good about? So usually it's this is a person with like, literally an automated person without an identity doing some sort of task on a regulated entity, whether it's a bank, DMV, like your maybe like a food program, that's ran by the government. Like perhaps there's these agents doing things that are not licensed to go and do those things. I think it's going to be less. Um, Folks that are in crypto, like the regulation of AI is going to be more around the same challenges that big data faced, like Facebook's and Google's faced with like, Congress, and perhaps like DOJ might find an agent that's doing some crazy activity and is, not allowed to be doing that. But like in crypto, like we're talking mainly to CFTC and SEC, and some folks get to talk to that DOJ, and like some folks are talking to the White House. But like this is different. Like this is not really concerning if a thing as a security or a commodity. It's not necessarily focused on the financialization. It's more about data. It's more about trust and safety of regulated entities, like government kind of owned programs. And then the biggest thing that is more like coming from the White House is really just the pace of innovation. So, like I spent a lot of time in mainland China, and it's a beautiful country, beautiful people, amazing tech. Like they are just, brilliant. And so we have a lot of this. We have this AI war happening between, Hangzhou and Chengdu, and well, technically Beijing's kind of where the political motivations come from, but the LLM innovations coming out of those other cities, and Silicon Valley in the White House, right? And so if it's a race for kind of AI competition, they're both protecting their house. Like in China, you cannot talk to the DeepSeek team without going through the government. With Silicon Valley, it's just very competitive in terms of how you're working with different companies, and even if you're on the good side of the government, perhaps regulation will sway in some positive direction. How do we get regulators in sooner? I think the conversations are happening for sure. I don't think it's as much in the public as like a lot of the crypto regulation is right now because it's not the top of mind conversation, which is crazy. Like you would think AI would be the craziest thing people are talking about in tech and governance, but it's crypto. Like they want to onboard the financial world into these new rails, and I think AI is probably just a few years away from having some heavier regulation, or more like having more of the spotlight. Maybe even a year. It might be sooner. Like something's gonna break, and someone's gonna get shut down or like stopped because we have a crazy man running the White House who like will get word that something's just not working, and he needs to shut it down immediately. And so who knows what that is, but yeah, we need more trust and safety around platforms that are using our data and serving AI applications. But in open source, like Meta and Llama and all these other open source AI infrastructures, we need to ensure that they are upkept just as much as any open source project in the world. It's freedom of speech, and people should be able to use these technologies how they wish to some extent. If you are serving this to customer base, like you are now the custodian of these customers' safety. So um, that's my opinion on things.
Thanks. And just quickly, a final one. When are you guys planning to launch the Gaia mainnet? And if you can just give me a quick answer, and you don't need to give me the exact date, but I would love to hear at least whether it will be later this year or in Q3 or Q2. What's the plan there?
Um, I can say Q2. That's what I can say.
Okay,
Um,
so
yeah.
that's really good. I think our listeners should be looking forward to that, and it'll be happening within the next 3 months.
Yeah, and what I'll coach people to do, what you can do now, one, go to our GitHub, deploy a node, see how it works. If you're a developer, I would love you to reach out to me and let me know your experience. If you have um, the time to kind of fine tune your node, go nuts. But also go pick up a domain. Go get a the domains are essentially short names for like your own Gaia real estate. So you should go get cryptobro.gaia and start running some nodes.
Yeah, I definitely will.
We'll
Nice.
train some agents on your podcasts.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll definitely look into it, and I would love to stay in touch with you, and I'll keep you updated on how that's going.
Of course, man. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining.